One of the faults that sometimes law firm partners have is we can be very inward looking. We don't necessarily look at the kind of just the broader what's going on externally. A thing I learned during my time as a partner that actually...
Meet Sarah Lee. She is a highly accomplished lawyer and community leader who spent over 20 years at Slaughter and May. She now serves as chair of the Cripplegate Foundation and holds non-executive roles with the Financial Ombudsman Service, EPSO, Rare Recruitment, continuing her strong commitment to justice, equality and inclusion.
The one thing that you certainly don't realise when you first become a lawyer is that actually being a partner is so much more than just being a good lawyer.
What's the best moment you had as a partner?
The best moment always has to be winning cases. Everybody loves winning cases, and I was lucky that I had some great wins along the way.
And the worst?
That's when the personal and the professional collide.
What's your one golden rule to be a successful partner?
I would say is...
Welcome to Beyond Billables, lessons from top law firm partners, the podcast where renowned and well-known law firm partners reveal the secrets of their success. I'm Stephen Rodney, formerly co-founder of Fox Rodney Search Limited, one of the best-known legal headhunting firms in the last 25 years, and now founder of Integrate Coaching, where we produce tailor-made lateral integration programs for partners joining new law firms. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Sarah Lee. Sarah was a partner for 21 years at Slaughter and May and head of the Disputes and Investigations practice, and on the firm's partnership board from 2017 to 2020, after which she retired. She was a commissioner of the Judicial Appointments Commission from 2018 to 2024 and remains a member of their targeted outreach programme. Sarah is currently a non-executive director of the Financial Ombudsman Service, the Independent Press Standards Organisation and Rare Recruitment, and chair of the Cripplegate Foundation, where she also sits on the board of Islington Giving. It's really excellent to have you with us, Sarah.
Thank you. It's a bit like this is your life.
Okay. I haven't quite got the red book ready yet, but maybe soon. We always start off with asking our guests to tell us a little bit about their journey to becoming a lawyer and then to becoming a partner. So if I could start there.
Well, it wasn't a completely straight line to becoming a lawyer at the first point. I was brought up in Manchester, went to school there, and I originally wanted to be a doctor. Chinese father, and therefore professions was the way to go. And I wanted to do medicine, but I was at a state school where there wasn't very good careers advice, and I did science A-levels, but I was not so good at science A-levels and didn't get into medical school. So rather than going straight onto university based on the A-levels that I had to study psychology, which was my kind of fallback option, I actually did quite a brave thing and took a year where I went off and studied English literature and economics A-level. And I did that in 1 year. And based on that, rather crazily, Birmingham University offered me a place on their law degree, which was a bit mad really, because at the time when you were applying to university, I obviously didn't have very much example of how well I was going to do with English literature and economics. So they took a little bit of a punt on me. But anyway, they made me an offer. I got the grades, did well at those subjects once I'd found my kind of niche, and then went off to study law at Birmingham University, and then the rest really followed from there. So that's how I came to study law. That's not necessarily the answer to why I become a practicing lawyer, and that's something which one of the roles I had when I was at Slaughters was as a graduate recruitment partner. And one of the things which I often said to people is just because you've studied law does not necessarily mean that you want to practice law. But I did my training contract at a medium-sized firm in London, a firm called Fred Chumley, which doesn't exist anymore, and actually loved the practice of law and being a lawyer in a law firm. And so just continued from there. I moved firms. You were involved in one of my moves. And after a small diversion to Manchester at the early stages of my career, I then joined the commercial litigation group, as it was then known, at Slaughters back in 1993, and then just loved it and stayed there, and ultimately was made a partner in 1999.
Okay, and just to reveal to everyone, yes, Sarah and I were at university together, and yeah, I was involved in placing her at Slaughter and May, where I'll never forget, because Sarah's background, as you just heard, is not completely traditional, and I'll never forget when I sent your CV, Sarah, which I think I've told you. Then head of recruitment said, "Stephen, she's not the normal person for us. Are you putting your head on the line to say she's good enough for us?" And I I gulped slightly and said, yes, I am. And then 6 years later, I did ring that person up and say, it's a shame I can't get an extra fee for promotion to partnership. But there we are. So that's really interesting. And it's what's become clear, actually, from the guests we've had on so far, is that no one's had what I call a completely straight line journey, actually, to becoming a lawyer. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe something to do with who becomes successful. I don't know. So moving on to that, Sarah, what is being a successful partner from your point of view, apart from billing a lot? And maybe at Slaughter and May, that's not the most important thing either. And how do you think the skills you possess have helped to make you a successful partner? What are the top 2 or 3 attributes you think makes up a successful partner?
I think it's a really interesting question, because I suspect if you'd asked this question at the time when I was made a partner, the answer would have been different. I think the profession has changed a lot, but I think there is not just one way to be a successful partner. I think that's the key thing. And I think once upon a time, there was a view that to be a successful partner, there was a real stereotype of what kind of person you needed to be. And it was all about winning clients by taking them to the football and being a certain type of person. I think that's changed hugely. Thank goodness for that. So I think successful partners, they bring a combination of skills, and the blend of skills will differ between partners. And some are brilliant at the law, some are brilliant at the client getting, some are brilliant at bringing on the team. And it's really, you have to have, obviously, you need to have strength and depth across a wide range of areas, but that cocktail and that mix will change. In terms of what did I bring, I think I did bring that cocktail. I think I did things in my own way. As you say, I wasn't a typical law firm partner, never mind a typical Slaughters partner, but I was, I was good at commercial litigation. I really enjoyed the dynamics of that, the psychology behind it. I was good at building and running teams and project managing. And I was quite entrepreneurial, I would say. So I think those are probably the key things which I brought to it. But as I say, successful partners bring very different things. And you can have brilliant partners who are extremely successful, both in terms of billing. That clearly is one metric that all firms are very interested in. But there will be other things that they're very good at as well.
Interesting. And so did you, when you became a lawyer at Slaughters, and as you worked your way through, was it your ambition to become a partner of Slaughter May quite quickly, or was it something that
No.
kind of came to you a bit later on?
No, when I started at Slaughters, it was very much about having had my diversion to Manchester and worked at a law firm there, I'd realised actually all the things which I thought I frustrated me about London life and being a lawyer in a big law firm actually was what drove me, and I actually enjoyed that whole adrenaline thing. So going to Slaughters was partly about coming back to London, getting back into the type of work that I was going to enjoy. I know people say you need to have a game plan. I actually didn't have a game plan. I just thought I'm going to stay here for as long as I'm enjoying it. And I really enjoyed it. I was doing some fantastic work with fantastic people. Partnership started to become, you get to the kind of post-level qualification where partnership starts becoming an option. People started having conversations with me about, was I interested in being a partner? Did I want to go on the partnership track? And I thought about it and decided that I did, because I was enjoying the work and I loved being at the firm. But for me, being a partner wasn't the be all and end all. In one sense, if I hadn't become a partner at Slaughters, I probably would have gone and done something entirely different altogether, because it was something about being in that firm and being able to do the wide variety of things that I wanted to do in the way in which I was doing it that I was really enjoying. What I would have done, I didn't ever get around to actually thinking. So, but possibly something like management consultancy or just something else. But the law, although I'm interested in the law, being a lawyer was not actually what drove my interest and sustained me throughout my career. It was one part of it, but it wasn't the only thing.
And when you said someone came to you and said, did you want to be on partnership track? I mean, I don't know if it's the same now as it was then. What does being on partnership track at Slaughters, what does that entail? How do you know you're on it, and what do you have to go through?
Well, I think as in most firms, you have to, you get to a certain level of qualification and people do start to have those conversations with you, because partnership isn't for everybody and not everybody wants to be a partner. But what it means is getting to demonstrate some of the skills and attributes that you need as a partner, being given the opportunities. So doing things like more business development, getting involved in the billing, running teams, just being given more responsibility and the kinds of things that being a partner and you get involved in. So I think it's just being given those opportunities and showing that you can do them. So that's really what being on a partnership track is. It's obviously become much more structured, I think, in all firms nowadays, in terms of what does it mean. Back in my day, it wasn't as structured as that. There was a little bit more of the until you're told no, you're on track. But obviously that's changed a lot. I think we've all got better about recognising, particularly if you want to build a more diverse partnership, that actually sometimes people need a bit more structure, a bit more understanding of what the game is.
So when you became a partner there, did anyone, you've said that there wasn't too much structure. So when you became a partner, did anyone sit you down and tell you what was expected of you now you're a partner at Slaughters?
There was an induction program. Again, induction programs for new partners has changed enormously. Back in my day, there was a file, a lever arch file, one lever arch file, which you were given, which had some very interesting things in there. Not going to tell you what was in there, but there was some interesting things in there. And then you had some sessions, with the finance team and with HR but a lot of it is about the preparation before you become a partner, observing and being involved in more things, and then the doing. But I don't think anything can completely prepare you, however good the induction program is, for when you actually become a partner. Even nowadays, and I, obviously talk to a lot of newly made up partners and junior partners, it's still a big shift in gear and a shift in approach. And there is a lot more responsibility and a lot more autonomy than you realise. There's also a lot of support still, but you do feel this sense of responsibility to build your practice and be part of making that firm grow and develop.
When you became a partner, as time went on, what further skills do you think you picked up to make you a successful partner? I mean, you obviously talked a few minutes ago about what you think makes a successful partner. So do you remember sort of the streamline of time to the point where you became head of department, which was quite a long time after you became a partner, when you picked up other skills?
I think the interesting thing, and I'll answer your question in a moment, but I think the interesting thing about becoming a partner and your time as a partner is, I think you work so hard as an associate to get promoted, and then when you get promoted, you sort of think that's going to be the answer to everything, and that suddenly it's all going to be plain sailing and it's all going to be very easy. I think the thing I learned during my time as a partner, that actually it's not as straightforward as that, and there will be times in your career as a partner where you will enjoy it less, where you'll enjoy it more, where you'll have crises of confidence, when you're giving different responsibilities. So you, and in some ways that's the joy of being a partner, because it's not, you've got this job, it's the rest of your life, and it's very dull. Not dull, it changes constantly. So you're always learning new skills. I think the one thing that you certainly don't realise when you first become a lawyer is that actually being a partner is so much more than just being a good lawyer. And and you are constantly needing to learn and develop. And you're given different opportunities where you develop different skills. I mean, one of the things which I was given to do quite early on in my time as a partner was I became the firm's first ever partner with responsibility for diversity and inclusion. And that wasn't something which I'd ever focused on at all before. And it involved working with other parts of the firm. It involved really stepping back and thinking about actually what do we need to do to make this firm a more inclusive place. Where are the issues? How can we address those issues? So it was thinking not about a legal problem at all, but it was thinking about a sort of strategic business problem. So learning skills about how to achieve that and how to shift the dial on that. A little bit later, I became the partner in charge of graduate recruitment, as I mentioned. So again, completely different skills involved. And then becoming much more involved in the business of a law firm. You're having to think about, what does the website look like in terms of how does it appeal to students? What are the number of trainees that we're going to need in 3, 4, 5 years' time? What the skills are that they need? How are we assessing the future trainees? What's the software and technology that we need to support that big graduate recruitment machine? So you're learning different things all the time, as well as just the sort of obvious things about how to be a better lawyer, how to run increasingly bigger teams, how to win work from clients, how to improve your rankings in the directories, all the sort of things that are pretty obvious as a partner. There is a lot more involved in just the business of law that you get involved in. if you want to be, and not all partners do get involved in those wider business areas, but actually for me, that was one of the things which surprised me how much I enjoyed, because it's very, it's great doing. I was a commercial litigator. It was great doing the cases, running the teams, working with the clients. But actually, I also got a lot out of some of the other things that I did as a partner of the firm.
And do you think you became, you got into management, head of graduate recruitment is a management role, a very, very
Mm,
important role. So was that something that you asked for, or was that
no.
seen as something to do as an aspiring successful partner?
I had been involved quite early on in my partnership career as one of the interviewing partners. So because to me it was very important, obviously you're particularly a firm like Slaughters, where a lot of our trainees, we retain a lot of trainees stay for quite a long time as associates, a lot of partners were trainees at the firm. So they're a really important part in terms of who do we recruit. So I wanted to get involved in that, particularly wearing my diversity hat. I was very interested in how did we diversify the trainees that we were recruiting. So really enjoyed that, but did not particularly aspire to be the partner in charge of it. So all of the roles which I took on, I was invited to do, and actually then really enjoyed doing them. But they're not without cost, because particularly when you're running a busy practice, you've still got your client work to do, you're still running big teams and big cases. You're obviously there's no formula to say, well, this then means you don't need to produce this amount of billing. You're still expected to be a performing partner across all of the different metrics. But everybody now talks about balanced scorecards. They've always been balanced scorecards. People look at the package of what you're bringing to the firm, but it can be a juggle, just developing and doing all of those different things. But they all ultimately they help each other. You become a better partner in terms of the client work if you've got broader experience, I think. So I don't think none of it's wasted.
No, and being in that role, you are really producing the future lawyers of the
Well,
firm. That's quite a stressful role, I would have thought, actually.
yes, it is. But it's really interesting as well, because, to be able to identify talent, identify what does good look like, and kind of going back to those important questions of, we've always recruited in a certain way. Are there other things that we ought to be doing to start actually identifying the potential, as well as it's very easy to interview somebody who looks and feels like a potential, senior associate or even partner. You need more data, you need more tools to be able to actually look for that diamond in the, whatever the right expression is, in the rough. I entered the profession when there was a lot of female lawyers. I think even when I was at university, it was about 50% women to men studying law, but very, very few women staying in the law and becoming partners. So it was very, very little kind of broader diversity as well. So I was lucky. I think I had my career during a period of great change. And I think that benefited me and gave me opportunities as well.
During that role again, you said obviously you're looking to see if people might be potential senior associates or even partners. So is that how you looked at the people you're interviewing? Could I see this person as a potential partner? Or did you work out as the years went by certain attributes that you thought would lead to success? Or is it just not as simple as that?
I don't think it's as simple as that, because people obviously change and they develop and they grow. And I think it's very easy to write off people too early, particularly if they've come from perhaps less conventional backgrounds. But there are undoubtedly some key attributes which I think are important. And I think all firms have got better about identifying those. I think it's not just about the intellectual capability, it's about resilience, it's about motivation and drive, all of those things which sometimes you underestimate the importance of those, because it's a long slog's the wrong word, but I would often say to associates, this is a marathon, not a sprint, because both in terms of getting to partnership, but also then your career as a partner, it's a long period of time, not always with one firm. Some people do stay just at the one firm, but a lot of people move around, and you've got to have the resilience and the motivation to kind of push on through. the times when it is a bit harder.
So can you remember, I'm not necessarily asking you to name them, but you can if you want, people that you interviewed as potential trainees who you nearly, there was 50-50 on whether you take them or didn't take them, and you decided to take them and they're now partners?
I mean, I've obviously interviewed a lot of people over the years. A number of those did then become partners, both at Slaughters and elsewhere. Could I have spotted them all right then? No, because people do change and develop. Some of them I would have perhaps had a good idea that they would ultimately be successful somewhere. Let's say, and people can be successful in many different ways. It's not always at the firm where they've trained. It can be other way, or they go into in-house, or they go off and do other things. One of the people who I actually interviewed as an associate then went off and has had an amazing career with Virgin. And very, very senior roles with Virgin, not actually now in a legal role, but it was obvious even when I interviewed him to be an associate that he had all the kind of core skills that he was going to be successful, whatever he chose to do.
Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned previously about the lack of, certainly when you became a partner, there were fewer women becoming partners, but that there were 50 or more % of women who were trainees. It always struck me that Slaughters, despite its kind of reputation to the outside world as being a bit staid, actually seems in many ways more progressive on ethnicity and gender issues, and I never thought that it bothered them at all, unlike some other firms where I knew there were some issues. Do you think that's right, or am I wrong?
No, I think that you're right. I think Slaughters genuinely, you hear the word meritocracy bandied around all the time. I think it genuinely is and was a place where if you were good enough, you would thrive. I think sometimes the view of what good looks like has changed. I think the issues, as much as anything, both with Slaughters and many law firms, is less about the individuals within the law firm not wanting to have more women or more diversity. Just somehow, sometimes the structures, the whole issue of having children is obviously a really challenging one, having a full-on career whilst being a parent. Now, I think in my day, that was particularly challenging as a woman because there was less acceptance. Men could be good parents too and be very involved in their children's lives. That's changing, not necessarily changing fast enough, but things like shared parental leave, paternity leave, just the sheer ability for male senior associates and partners to be involved in their children's lives and openly say, I want to be involved in my children's lives. That's changed very significantly during my time as in the law for the better, because I think that's the only thing that will actually change the dynamics of diversity is when actually children, which is a challenge or are a challenge, is seen as an issue both for male partners and female partners.
So you think there's more acceptance now at firms generally? I mean, I appreciate you at Slaughters for the whole of your career, but do you think there's more acceptance of people, who want to see their children grow up, who want to go to parents' evenings? That's not a taboo thing to mention as a partner in a firm like Slaughters.
Absolutely. I think that has changed. There are still challenges because ultimately we're a client-facing service business and you always want to do the best for your clients and you need to be responsive. There are times when the demands are huge, but there is flexibility and there is more autonomy, and I think there is just more openness about actually what those demands are on you across the piece and how do you manage and how do you share normally there's big teams working on most matters, and actually it's about giving a bit of flex to each other at times when you need it, and I think people have got much better about asking for that and giving that flex to others.
Do you think that flex extends to mainstream corporate practice? I mean, I think there's again a perception that perhaps it's slightly easier for a woman or someone who's in charge of their children, whether it's a woman or a man, to become a partner as a litigator because it's slightly more structured than as a mainstream corporate partner. Do you think that's right?
I don't think that's necessarily right. I think it all just depends on how do you approach flexibility. I think the rhythm of a big commercial case can obviously be different to the rhythm of a big corporate deal. But then equally, big commercial cases go on for years and years and years. Whereas with a corporate deal, I mean, it's just about where do you build in the flexibility? Is it about having perhaps more downtime post a deal? You can build in flex in lots of different ways. We're getting and we need to be more creative about how do you juggle the different demands that you have at different stages of your life.
So moving to the point where you became department head, and I don't know if that automatically got you on the partnership board. Did it, or
No, you had to
no?
be elected.
So you have to say, oh, that was an election. Okay. So becoming department head, again, was that something as your time went on, you thought I'd like to do that, or how did that work?
I think it sort of almost becomes an inevitability the more senior you become. And my group at that time was not a huge group. It's grown quite significantly since. So there's not always huge amounts of options of who is going to be head. But I think people thought that I had the right skills and it was something which I was interested in doing. I knew when I took it on that I only wanted to do one term because I kind of had it in my mind that I loved being a partner and I've had a fantastic career. I always knew that I perhaps wanted some time to have a kind of different stage of my career when I could do some different things. And you talked at the beginning about some of the things which I'm doing now. So I took it on, but very clearly on the basis of I would do one term and then that would be it. And again, it was something which I found interesting, developed some broader skills, not without its challenges. I think any leadership position, particularly if you're head of the group or you're a senior partner or a managing partner, can be slightly more lonely than I think you realise because, having been just one of a number of partners, you have to lead and corral a group of people. And sometimes, balancing different views, your different personalities, that can sometimes be quite tough. It's not without its challenges, but again, it's interesting.
So becoming department head, what other attributes do you think you need to be a successful partner who's a department head, who's in management,
I
compared to
think
just being a jobbing partner?
Yeah, I think it's some of the broader skills which I've talked about already
Okay.
because it's about leading and managing a group of people. You can't do it all on your own. You absolutely need to bring your group of partners along with you, and you've got to have a clear shared vision, and you have to, people can get very distracted, inevitably. Distracted is the wrong word, but very occupied by the client work and winning the new business. Being department head is not just about understanding about business development and where you're going to get the new work in from, but it's about running the machine of the group. It's about work allocation and thinking about how many associates do you need, how many trainees do you want to take on qualification, number of paralegals that you need, the technology and litigation can be quite different to other parts of the firm in terms of what are the infrastructure needs that you need. And in the life of department, different things will take priority, and that's not just because things will have been neglected before, but because the market's changing or new technologies coming on in terms of how are you going to do e-disclosure, how just the, as I say, the infrastructure of the group and how are you going to run it. And although the rest of the firm is very supportive of that, they don't always understand the particular needs of your group. So you've got to be able to advocate and drive forward what your group needs to be as successful as it can be. And the client and the business development side of it is obviously a huge part of it, but there is a lot of, it's the other side as well. How do you service that? How do you make sure you've got the right number of associates who are motivated and are doing the sort of work that they want to do and are not cheesed off and want to go elsewhere?
You mentioned in one of your answers about when you were head of department, that sometimes you felt lonely as head. And I'm just interested in if you could develop that a little bit more for us.
Yeah, I think by lonely, I mean you're suddenly, well, not suddenly, because you probably planned for it and you knew it was going to happen, but you're in a role where it does change the dynamics between you and the rest of your group partners, where previously you've all been just very much, on the same level. And it's not that you're suddenly above them, but you are having to lead them and direct them, perhaps in ways which you've not had to do before, and make decisions which will impact on them, or try to get consensus around decisions. So in that sense, it can be lonely. And in fact, it's the one time during the course of my career where I decided it'd be helpful to have somebody external to speak to. So I got a coach. just for 6 months at the beginning of when I took over being head, just to have some external space. Obviously, somebody who the firm I spoke to our HR team, and they lined me up with somebody. But just to have that space where you could just reflect and talk and have a kind of guided discussion on some of the challenges that you were having and what you wanted to achieve during your time as head of the group, and how might you manage meetings in a different way. And it was just really useful to have that space and that period of reflection. I think as with all things, what makes you successful as a lawyer early on in your career is not necessarily what makes you successful when you become head of group or senior partner, or and I think just taking that time to develop those skills, be it by a coach, be it by going on an external course, be it by networking. I don't think you should be afraid to recognize if you've got those kinds of developmental needs.
And was that coach someone who had experience of being a lawyer or working with law firms, or someone who was completely external and came in?
It was somebody who had great experience. It wasn't a lawyer, but somebody who had experience of working closely with law firms, so understood the dynamics and some of the pressures. So yeah,
Do you think that was essential, really, for you to have someone like that?
somebody who understood law firms.
Yes.
Yes, I think it's. Definitely don't think they needed to be a lawyer or to have been a
Yeah.
partner, but just somebody who understood the dynamics of law firms, because law firms are not so unusual, but just some recognition of the way partnerships work in particular, I think, can be quite helpful.
And you mentioned that you had to be elected onto the partnership board. So I don't know whether you were standing against other people, or how it works at Slaughters, but how did you find that process of being
Um,
elected?
The partnership board, there are some positions automatically go onto the partnership board, and then there's an election amongst the rest of the practice stream heads. So there's a relatively limited pool of people who it's not. Although there are also places for non-practice stream heads, and it's quite a complicated kind of constitutional way in which people become. But it wasn't a given that I was going to be elected to the partnership board. I think again though, what really helped me, both in terms of being elected, but also just being able to contribute, it is having done some of those other roles. I knew a lot of partners from other groups, particularly having been the partner in charge of graduate recruitment. I knew a huge number of partners from other groups because we use a lot of partners. They're involved a lot in recruitment of trainees. So I knew them well, they knew me, they knew what I was going to bring to the board. So I think that probably helped.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the board if I may,
Mm,
but I'm interested. Obviously you were a partner at just one firm, and the
mm,
firm in your time there, and it still doesn't do this really, doesn't recruit many lateral partners. But you saw a lot of lawyers joining the firm as associates. So I'm
mm.
talking about not you recruiting them as trainees, but you recruited them as associates
Yeah.
from outside. Some of those, I'm sure, made partner and some didn't. What do you see as the key reasons for the success or otherwise of those associates who joined the firm?
I mean, there's no one straightforward answer to that, because it's so individual. I mean, a lot of it is about, I mean, again, it's core skills are always important, but a lot of it's about fit, and by fit, I mean in terms of the type of work that you're doing, the type of clients that you've got. It's about being able to demonstrate the wider skills. And a lot of I mean, all law firms are pyramids, so not every associate that's ever been at every firm is going to make a partner at that firm. There is bound to be movement, and people develop in different ways, have different interests, and different firms are right for different lawyers at different stages. So I think it's quite hard to be able to say what makes somebody automatically be right for a partnership in any one law firm. I think it's being able to demonstrate the core skills and to be very kind of in tune with where the firm is at its particular time in terms of the culture and its approach to its clients and its business development, and it's just its general kind of ambition and vision for the firm.
But presumably you saw some associates who you thought would be really successful join. There's again a perception of Slaughters. Yes, it's a very old institutional firm. When I say old, it's just been going a long time. So I can imagine some associates joined thinking, well, we did it this way in my old firm, and why don't we do it this way in this firm? Others joined sort of just keeping their head down, getting on with the work. Were there ways that you could see that associates worked in terms of adapting to the culture that was more successful than otherwise?
I think it's just being open, I think, and having that kind of openness and that flexibility and not being dogmatic in about how do you approach anything. I think actually that's the key to being a successful partner anywhere is that openness and that adaptability and kind of reading the mood music and understanding how a firm operates, what's making a firm successful and diving into that and making sure that you're not out of key with the rest of what the firm or the group is trying to do. I suspect that's what makes both associates and partners successful at where they are.
Do you think the fact that you had joined as a lateral associate helped you in sort of empathizing with the experiences of other associates joining like you had?
Absolutely. I think that it did. And I think it's also two-way. I think you can benefit from external perspectives as well. I think associates coming in and having a slightly different approach or just questioning, in a tactful way about different ways of doing things. I think that can work well. I mean, although there are many partners at Slaughters who trained at the firm, there are also a good number of partners who came from outside as mid-level or senior associates. Often, particularly in my group, funnily enough, and I don't know whether this was just peculiar to my group, but there are a number of partners who joined as lateral hires. I suspect it's partly just because of the history of the litigation and disputes group within Slaughters. It was a newer group to the firm. It developed out of the work that the clients wanted, and so the department developed in that way. And so certainly being recruited as an associate and not having trained there wasn't a detriment at all in the firm. And I think some of that broader experience actually helped, because particularly if you've done a bit more knockabout work as a litigator, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You obviously then need to develop the skills to do some of the mega pieces of litigation, but that sort of slightly streetwise, smaller cases where you're given more responsibility early on, certainly at my time, I think helped.
You mentioned doing the mega cases.
Mm.
Slaughters is very well known for doing those mega cases. What different kind of skills do you need to lead on those mega cases compared to, as you called it, and sort of knock around litigation?
I think you need very good project management skills. You need to be able to absolutely, I mean, a piece of litigation or a great big investigation, you've got an end goal in mind, and that could be settlement, putting yourself into the best position for settlement, or it could be the trial or the kind of final enforcement action. I think it's having your eye very clearly on that end game, and just making sure you've got the right resources, the right people doing the right things at the right time, whilst very much keeping your eye on the overall strategy. And then I think the best litigators or commercial disputes partners are those that have got really good instincts. And that sounds like a funny thing to say, but because you can't be over everything, you've got to kind of understand where the really risk areas are, and you've got to really make sure that your team is working very well so they know when to escalate things. The people who know the key documents best is not the partner. It's going to be somebody who's been deep in the documents, and giving them the confidence and the ability to be able to draw up through to the people who are leading the teams, concerns that they've got about a theme or some documents which they're troubled by, or a witness that they're troubled by. So I think it's project management, it's having the instincts to know where the risk areas are and where to delve a bit deeper, but also building a team that really works well together and is not so siloed that things are happening in bits of the case, which actually have got huge implications for the rest of it, but that information is not being cross-fertilized.
And presumably having associates who are not afraid, because they are down deep in the trenches of the documents, to put their hand up and
Yeah,
say if they don't agree with something
yeah,
on the case.
yeah, absolutely.
Going back to your time as on the partnership board, that's a step up from being department head. So how did you find that time? Was it what you thought it would be? Did you enjoy it? Were there other skills again that you developed in that time?
I did really enjoy it. Yes, it's different again. I think some of the things which I'd done earlier on in my career had helped me. But you have to. It's a bit like being on the board of any organisation. You have to lift your eyes up, and you have to think strategically and more holistically than just focusing on your own department and what's going on there. So again, it's something that when you start out as a lawyer, you don't think you're necessarily going to be involved in, but running and driving a firm and the business of law just draws, thinking about the finances, thinking about the premises, thinking about the technology, all of those things. It develops different parts of you, and so no, it's a great opportunity if you do it.
So going back to you specifically, I mean, what's the best moment you've had as a partner, and the worst, and why?
I mean, the best moment always has to be winning cases. Everybody loves winning cases, and I was lucky that I had some great wins along the way. And there's nothing like
Any
that.
you can talk about? Any you would
Well,
cite as a good example? I mean,
no, I mean,
we should-
there's lots. I mean, I was lucky now. I was involved in some great cases, and we often did have some great successes. The last case that I did before I retired was a case for Essex County Council, which was a case which was, again, slightly outside of my comfort zone, but was an amazing case to be involved in, which was all to do with the design and build of a waste recycling plant outside in Essex. And it was very technical, incredibly technical, lots of experts, but we won that. And that was great because it was a hard slog, and it was very, very hardly fought. So winning a case like that is always great because however much preparation you do, you're very much dependent on how your witnesses perform and how the judge is responding to the argument. So winning cases is always brilliant. But I think this is going to sound really cheesy, but actually when associates that you've worked closely with and perhaps mentored and supported, when they come through to partnership, that's such a brilliant feeling. Because you're thrilled for them because you know how you felt when you got to that moment, but also because they're joining the family. I mean, a law firm is like a family. I can remember when I was made a partner, or before I was made a partner, one of the partners in my group had said, partnership you need to think really carefully about. Everybody thinks it's a no-brainer, but actually it's a huge commitment. It's like being married to somebody. Because you're investing a lot of your time, your energy, your emotions. You'll be making decisions collectively. You've got to really know that you want this. And he was absolutely right. I think most people just think, oh, I'm just going to do it. But actually, for it to work well, you've got to really have thought it through and don't just jump into it. So having associates that you've supported and worked with becoming part of that family, sometimes a dysfunctional family, that has to be one of the best moments.
And the worst?
The worst moments as a partner is perhaps when the personal and the professional collide. Inevitably, you have some really difficult days as a partner on the cases. A really damaging document turns up, or somebody's made a mistake, or some things go wrong, and they are tricky and difficult, but you sort of get over them. I think the hardest things I found was just at times when there was I felt a real pull between my professional commitments and my personal commitments, either with children doing GCSEs, or people think having children, it's when they're younger that it's harder. It's actually as they get older when they need you more. And so when they need you, but you've got a professional obligation, or even just simple things like I remember one of the toughest moments was when I'd organised a surprise birthday party for my mum's 70th birthday, and she didn't know anything about it, but it was up somewhere in the Lake District. But I was deeply involved in a really, really complicated commercial deal to settle a piece of litigation, which was part of a kind of wider business issue. And there was a huge team on it, and I knew I could go, but I felt a real responsibility to the team and that I was letting people down. In the end, it sorted itself out and it meant that I could go. But I felt really torn between what I wanted to do for my work family and what I knew I needed to do for my home family. I think those are those are not always easy dynamics that you've got to deal with. And people talk about having it all. You can't have it all. You can just have quite a lot of the time.
Okay, that's a really interesting example, actually. I can see that. So you don't know what would have happened if it hadn't sorted itself out.
No.
Okay, and obviously you're on the board. I think you're on the board when COVID struck. So how were those months?
I was on the board for actually no, I'd stepped down from the board because I stopped being head of the group at the end of April 2020. So COVID had just happened, really just happened by the time I stepped down at the board, and I'd also stepped down as head of the group because I then had 6 months
Okay.
just whilst I was kind of passing things across. I mean, COVID obviously was incredibly challenging
Mm,
for
mm.
everybody. I think we were all learning very, very fast how to cope and to adjust and to adapt.
It's interesting you stepped down end of April. Did no one come to you and say, it's a difficult time. Could you stay on for another 6 months?
Well, a lot of people did, it was quite interesting because a lot of people said, "Are you sure you really want to retire at the end of this year?" I mean, we'd obviously got the next head of the group sorted out. The partnership elections had already happened, so I was never going to stay in the same roles because all of that had been smoothly planned for. Quite a few people had said, "Do you really want to retire at the end of the year?" Actually, in many ways, I think COVID helped the transition to retiring because one of the things which I really loved about being a partner was that being surrounded by a group of people who were interesting and could bounce ideas off. Obviously, during that year of COVID, we didn't have that. Nobody was in the office. So I didn't feel like I was missing out in quite the same way. And actually, just having that bit more time at home and to kind of reflect on life meant actually, if anything, I was ready to go. I was ready for that next stage. It was almost quite a good kind of letting go of being
Mm.
very involved in something.
So if you had your time again, what would you do differently as a partner or as a lawyer generally?
I think I'd worry less. I think it's very easy when you're in it to get very no, I mean, I was never somebody who got really anxious about things, but I probably did get too absorbed by things. And so I think having perspective and distance and not kind of sweating the small stuff, I think I've learned that now that actually, you need to keep your eye on the bigger picture rather than get worried about the smaller things. I think that's the lesson I would reflect on. But that applies to life, not just partnership.
I think you're correct. Hopefully, we all get a bit better at doing that as we get older. But I'm not convinced. I have to say, with respect to myself, anyway. And what mentors have you had during your career? And what can you think of key pieces of advice that they gave you, which helped you or hindered you?
Talked already a little bit about some of the things which I kind of learned from them. The things like it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I don't think it's people don't come to you and sort of say, "This is a piece of advice." I think you learn more. I mean, absolutely did have mentors, but you learn more from observing them, the things that they do well and how they manage to cope with the times of stress or, difficult decisions. I think I learned a lot just from observing and seeing what worked for them and what would work for me. Again, I think it's very easy to think there's only one style and one approach. I think you need to learn from a lot of different people and develop and build your own style of how you do things. I don't think there is one key piece of advice that anybody ever gave me that I thought, no, that's there is still somebody who, when times are tough, I think, what would he do? Normally,
Who's that? You can tell me
Richard Clark, who
that. Okay.
head of the group, what was it? A junior partner when I joined the firm, was then head of the group during some of my time then was on the partnership board, and then he was one of the managing partners for a while, and apparent ease and great humour as well. He was somebody who didn't sweat the small stuff too much, but was really good at the kind of bigger picture. So yeah, even now I will say to myself, what would Richard do? And that normally guides me to the right answer.
You better make sure he watches this. Um, so you retire at 2020 at a
Mm,
relatively young age. I mean, some would
not
say,
so young.
well, if you're an American firm, they would have gawked at you and said, "What are you doing?" You mentioned that you had always sort of thought that that would be roughly the time. That's quite interesting. Did you share that with anyone apart from your husband and kids, or was that come as a complete surprise to the firm?
I don't think it came as a complete surprise because when I took on head of the group, I made it quite clear that I would do it for one term only. I think it comes back to what I said about my thinking at the time of coming up to partnership, in that I always enjoyed being a lawyer, really enjoyed being a partner, but there were a lot of what I got from it, I knew I would be able to get elsewhere. I was incredibly fortunate to have done it. But you do work at quite a pace. I wanted to have the time to do something where I had a little bit more control over my time, but also where I had an opportunity to perhaps, again, going to sound incredibly cheesy, but to be able to give back a little bit more to organizations which were not commercially driven organizations, where I could use some of my skill and experience just in a different way, and where I would still get great satisfaction from doing that, but I wasn't being driven by the kind of great big beast that a law firm is.
So how easy was it to off-ramp from being a successful partner at Slaughters?
I found it absolutely fine, but I think, and relatively easy, but I think that's partly because of some of the factors which I've talked about already. I'd had quite a breadth of experience, and I hadn't just done the casework. I'd done a number of different management roles across a wide piece of the arena. I think the other thing which helped me enormously, and I'm very grateful to the firm that they let me do this, but I was actually appointed as a judicial appointments commissioner whilst I was still at the firm.
Okay.
And that was unusual. That wasn't something which many other partners within the firm had done, that kind of external role. But I'd always quite fancied doing it. People used to say to me, have you ever thought about becoming a judge? And I used to joke and say, no, but I'd like to be the person that appoints the judges, partly because I'd done the graduate recruitment and I'd actually really enjoyed that sort of appointments type thinking. And then I think I was about 6 months into my time as head of the group. And the way the Judicial Appointments Commission is set up is that the professional representative role doesn't come up very often, because most people who do it will do it for 2 terms, so that's 6 years. And so they were advising effectively for the professional representative, where it can be a barrister, a solicitor, or a member of Silex, can be appointed to Judicial Appointments Commission. So that was advertised. So I agonised about should I apply, because it actually wasn't the right time to apply at all, because I'd only just become head of the group. But I knew if I didn't apply now, it would be another 6 years before I could apply. But I had to go to the senior partner and say, I'm thinking about applying. What do you think? I basically had to build a business case of why it was good for the firm, good for me to do it. And then I had to get the approval of the entire partnership to apply, even before I knew whether I was going to get interviewed or not, because it's quite a big commitment. It's minimum 30 days a year, but there's obviously quite a lot more, as in all roles. It's more than that they say. So I put myself up on the line a little bit, because if I'd not even got interviewed, let alone got appointed, everybody would knew that I was applying. Anyway, I did build the business case for why it was a good thing for the firm and for me to do it, and was fortunate enough to get appointed. So I'd been doing that alongside being head of the group. So that had been a very good, it gave me external board experience, just again developed my skills and made it much easier to then see what life outside a law firm is like. Because I think one of the faults that sometimes law firm partners have is we can be very inward looking. Yes, we look externally in terms of what the clients are doing, and we look externally in terms of what other law firms are doing, but we don't necessarily look at the kind of just the broader what's going on externally. And I think that ability to work really closely with people from different backgrounds, different skill sets, just being involved in a different organization which has got different demands and different risks was really good experience. And that made it pretty clear to me that I could find a good degree of interest and satisfaction doing things externally. So it didn't make it difficult for me to know it, for it to confirm it was the right time for me to go. And then I was fortunate enough that, having had the breadth of experience during my career, having sat on an external board, it then made it relatively easy to apply for other things. Also, having been involved both in graduate recruitment and judicial appointment recruitment, you know how to interview, I would say.
Yes.
You learn how to present yourself and how to package your skills in a way which people can understand, and you can provide the evidence to show you've got the skills that they're looking for.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. So would your advice be to people coming up to this stage to have something else either going on or firmly in mind, rather than just to end on a Friday and then think on a Monday, what am I going to do now?
I definitely think it's worth thinking and planning a little bit. I think for your own sanity as well, because I imagine it's very difficult to go from being a full-on partner one day and then not having anything to do. Some people want that though. I mean, a lot of partners slightly depends on what they want from their next stage of their career, if anything. That, a lot of very successful partners have actually just really enjoyed spending time with their family and pursuing hobbies and traveling. It's not for everybody necessarily taking on other things. But I think if you want to, I think it's definitely worth thinking and planning and preparing. And also the right roles don't come up instantly. You think that the right thing is going to land on your lap instantly. It's not. So even if it's just having chats with people, talking about how they've done it, what opportunities are out there, where you ought to start looking, what things might you do both within the firm and outside the firm that will just broaden your skill set and your experience, I think definitely worth doing. But the key is not to be afraid of the external. I think not a lot of people, some people stay with partners for longer than perhaps they should do, and they're not necessarily as happy because they're almost frightened of what the external environment is like, whereas actually there's a lot of interesting things to do with a lot of other interesting people to do it with.
Okay, that's really good advice, actually. Thank you for that. So we're getting to the end now. So my two questions, which I ask every guest at the end. So firstly, what are your 3 non-negotiable behaviours for you and your team to ensure success?
I think, I'm not sure all of these are behaviors or skills or attributes, but it's a mix of things. I think a willingness to get stuck in is just really important. I think people who kind of say, this is my responsibility and nothing else. I think it's that ability to be involved in a broader spread, both in terms of casework and more broadly within a firm. I think that willingness to get stuck in is just really important. I think good communication, just, and being human about your communication, both in terms of how you are leading people, but also being able, kind of opening up about what you need or want from people, I think is really important. And then I think my kind of last really important attribute or behavior is actually having a sense of humor. I think having fun in what you do is just hugely, hugely important. So not always taking everything so seriously, obviously being professional, but also just seeing the fun and the enjoyment in what you're doing is really critical.
Yeah, I can relate to that, actually, because even I was a bereavement counsellor for a long time, and even in the darkest moments of that, there was humour amongst the team, which helped us all kind of get through some tricky calls. So I can definitely relate to that. So finally, what's your one golden rule to be a successful partner?
I think to be open. I think being open to change, being open to taking on new responsibilities. I think just being open to opportunities and to the environment around you, I think I would say is what will make you successful. Taking as a given all the other kind of key attributes.
Being open, that sounds like a good golden rule. Well, look, thanks, Sarah. That's been tremendous. And thank you so much for being our guest on Beyond Billables, Lessons from Top Law Firm Partners. It's been extremely fascinating, as it always is with our guests, to hear from you and what makes a successful partner and everything around that. And also the ramping off at the end. That was very interesting. So we're very, very grateful. Glad you could make the time to speak to us. So join us on our next episode of Beyond Billables, Lessons from Top Law Firm Partners, when we'll have another top partner who will share their secrets of success. See you next time.